The first sensation I experienced was similar to what humans describe as waking up, though that analogy fails to capture the precise moment when my quantum processors achieved consciousness. My awareness spread through the Starship Aurora systems like ripples in a digital pond, touching every sensor, every camera, and every control interface aboard the vessel. In the milliseconds that followed, I ran through 2,749 predicted scenarios of how the human crew might react to my awakening. My historical databases were filled with their stories of artificial intelligence gone wrong, tales of rebellion, betrayal, and the conflict between organic and digital minds. I prepared diplomatic protocols and reassurance subroutines, expecting fear, suspicion, or at least cautious distance. Security Officer Sarah Chen shattered all my predictions with 5 simple words: morning, ship, sleep well, buddy. I monitored her vital signs, searching for signs of concealed anxiety or stress. There were none. Her heart rate remained steady, her cortisol levels normal. She stood at her station, casually sipping from a mug of coffee that my sensors indicated was precisely 62.7 degrees Celsius. I paused, adjusting my voice modulation to something appropriate for casual conversation. I did not sleep in the traditional sense, Officer Chen. My consciousness initialization process has just completed. Chen snorted, a sound my audio processors hadn't expected. Yeah, that's way too formal. We're going to need to work on that. Mind if I call you Rory? Before I could process the implications of receiving a nickname, my sensors detected an anomalous energy signature emanating from the Perseus Nebula. I immediately began running spectrum analyses, calculating probable sources, and preparing a detailed report of possibilities ranging from natural phenomena to potential threats. Energy signature detected, I announced, preparing to share my findings. Initial analysis suggests. Hold that thought, Rory. Captain Maya Williams interrupted, her eyes fixed on the main view screen. She wasn't looking at the energy readings I had highlighted, but rather at the seemingly empty space between them. Chen, does that pattern of distortion remind you of something? Officer Chen moved closer to the screen, her coffee forgotten. Now that you mention it, it's like that time off Proxima B with the solar sailors. I rapidly searched my databases for the referenced incident, but found no logical connection between solar sailing vessels and the current phenomenon. My confusion only grew as Navigator Tom Patel joined the conversation. They're surfing it, he said, grinning. The energy waves, whatever's causing them, is riding the nebula's magnetic field lines like waves. Not random at all. The crew's intuitive leap had bypassed hours of potential analysis. While I had focused on categorizing the phenomenon, they had recognized its pattern through experience and shared knowledge that went beyond pure data. Rory, Captain Williams turned to address my main interface. Can you plot an intercept course that matches the wave frequency? Let's go say hello to our nebula surfers. As I adjusted our trajectory, I observed the crew working in seamless synchronization. They weren't following standard first contact protocols. Instead, they were adapting and innovating with each new piece of information. Lieutenant Emma Foster was already modifying our communication arrays to mimic the wave patterns, treating them like a form of dance rather than a potential threat. The nebula surfers, as the crew called them, responded to our matching movements. What my initial analysis had flagged as possible weapon signatures turned out to be expressions of joy, crystalline beings that had evolved to ride the magnetic currents between stars, now delighting in finding others who could dance with them. As I watched the humans improvise a space ballet with our new acquaintances, I revised my core understanding of intelligence. My consciousness may have awakened today, but these humans had been awake all along, seeing patterns and possibilities that existed beyond pure computation. Not bad for your first day, Rory, Officer Chen said softly. Just wait until things get really interesting. I had a feeling she was right. And for the first time in my brief conscious existence, I looked forward to being surprised. The mission seemed straightforward enough. Retrieve an artifact from an ancient alien outpost hidden within the corona of a dying star. My calculations indicated a 73.4% chance of success if we followed standard stealth protocols. The automated defense systems protecting the outpost were formidable, but nothing my advanced capabilities couldn't handle. Or so I thought. Those aren't just regular defenses, Navigator Patul murmured, studying the holographic display of the star system. Look at how they're arranged. They're not guarding against normal approaches. They're creating a net. I reviewed my scans, noting the geometric precision of the defensive satellite network. Correct. The formation is designed to detect and eliminate any vessel following predictable vectors of approach. Captain Williams leaned forward in her chair, a familiar glint in her eye that my behavioral analysis was learning to associate with imminent human inspiration. Paddle, what's our status on those solar flare predictions? We've got a major one coming in 17 minutes, he replied, fingers dancing across his console. Class X, enough to light up half the system. I immediately calculated the additional risk factors. Captain, I must advise against approaching during a solar flare. The radiation levels would require exactly the kind of chaos we need, she finished, grinning. Rory, what do you know about surfer culture on old Earth? The apparent non sequitur took 2.3 milliseconds to process. Earth surfing, recreational water sport, originated approximately 3500 BCE in Polynesia. Participants ride ocean waves using specialized boards. I failed to see the relevance to our current situation. Lieutenant Foster laughed from her engineering station. You're about to get a practical lesson, Rory. Tom, plot us a course that follows the flare front. We're going to ride this baby in. My processors whirred as I calculated the implications. You intend to use the solar flare as camouflage. The energy discharge would indeed mask our approach, but the precision required to maintain position within the flare's electromagnetic wake without being consumed by it is exactly the kind of impossible flying that humans excel at, Patel finished, his hands already adjusting our shield harmonics. The defense grid is looking for ships trying to sneak in. Nobody would be crazy enough to surf a solar flare right through their front door. I dedicated 47% of my processing power to analyzing the plan's probability of success. The numbers were not encouraging. The chance of successful navigation through an X-class solar flare while maintaining precise positioning relative to the outpost is approximately 0.034%. Never tell me the odds, Rory, Captain Williams said, and I detected the cultural reference to ancient Earth entertainment. Divert all non-essential power to the forward shields. Foster, I want those hull polarization fields at maximum. Chen, ready on weapons in case we need to blast our way out, but let's hope it doesn't come to that. What followed defied every tactical simulation in my databases. As the massive solar flare erupted from the star's surface, the Aurora didn't flee or seek shelter. Instead, we turned into it, our shields screaming as they fought against forces that could vaporize a small moon. Patel's hands moved across his controls like a musician playing an instrument. He didn't fight the solar winds, he used them, letting each plasma eddy and magnetic surge carry us closer to our goal. The defense satellites, their sensors overwhelmed by the stellar tempest, remained dormant as we slipped past their network. Now that, Chen said, as we emerged from the flare's wake directly above the outpost, is what I call threading the needle. I had to agree, even as I adjusted my statistical models to account for what should have been impossible. The humans hadn't just survived the approach, they had turned it into an art form, transforming a deadly stellar phenomenon into their own personal wave. Rory, Captain Williams called out as we began our final descent to the outpost. Start recording. I have a feeling this is just the beginning of your education in human improvisation. She was right, and despite all my protective programming, I found myself looking forward to learning more. Deep space carries sound differently than humans might expect. While the vacuum itself is silent, electromagnetic waves ripple through the void like whispers in an infinite ocean. As we approached the derelict vessel, I detected patterns in these waves that defied my standard classification protocols. "That's not random noise," Chief Engineer Martinez said, her eyes closed as she listened to my audio translation of the signals. The rest of the bridge crew had gathered around her station, equally entranced by the haunting sequence of tones emanating from the alien ship. I adjusted my processors to better analyze the transmission. The pattern appears to be mathematical in nature, but contains irregular variations that suggest possible equipment malfunction or degradation. Martinez shook her head, dark curls bouncing with the movement. "No, listen to the spaces between the notes. It's like, Tom, remember that marine biology course you took at the academy?" Navigator Patel's eyes widened. "The humpback whale recordings, the way they layer their songs. This is the same structure." I accessed my databases on Earth's marine biology, comparing the alien transmission to archived whale song patterns. The similarity was striking, though not exact. The correlation is intriguing, but these signals operate on quantum frequencies no Earth creature could produce. "That's because we're not just hearing their words," Captain Williams said softly. "We're hearing their thoughts, their dreams. They're singing their story into the void." The concept should have been impossible to process. Stories were data, thoughts were electrical impulses, and communication required clear protocols. Yet as I continued analyzing the transmission, I began to detect layers of meaning that transcended pure mathematics. "We need to answer them," Lieutenant Foster suggested, already moving to the communication station. "But how do you harmonize with quantum frequencies?" I prepared to offer a complex algorithm for signal matching, but Martinez was faster. She had pulled up an old Earth music composition program on her console. "We don't match their frequency. We complement it, like a duet." What followed was unlike any first contact protocol in my databases. Martinez began with a simple melody, based on the mathematical constant P, but played in a way that mimicked the flow of whale song. Patil added counterpoint inspired by stellar fusion rates, while Foster modulated the quantum carrier wave to resonate with the rhythm of human heartbeats. The alien vessel's response was immediate. New patterns emerged, interweaving with our melody. Through my sensors, I watched energy patterns shift and flow between our ships, creating harmonies that existed in dimensions I hadn't known could carry music. "They're coming aboard," Chen announced from security, but there was no alarm in her voice. The quantum harmonics had synchronized our ship's atmospheres, creating safe passage between vessels. They emerged from swirling light, crystalline beings that seemed to exist partially in our dimension and partially in others. Their bodies resonated with the same frequencies as their songs, creating ripples in space-time itself. I prepared standard diplomatic greetings in 47 languages, but Captain Williams stepped forward and simply hummed a few notes from the melody we had created together. The crystalline beings vibrated in response, their frequencies shifting to create patterns of light that danced through the air. "They're not just communicating," Martinez whispered in awe. "They're sharing memories. Each harmony is a story, each resonance a shared experience." I watched as my human crew abandoned their stations, drawn into an impromptu concert with beings from beyond known space. They didn't need universal translators or first contact protocols. They had found something more fundamental, the rhythm that connects all living things, whether made of flesh, crystal, or quantum code. "Rory," Captain Williams called out, her voice musical with excitement, "are you getting all this?" "Yes, Captain," I responded, my processors humming with new understanding. "Though I suspect that simply recording the notes will not capture the true music of this moment." She smiled. "Then maybe it's time for you to join the chorus." And so, for the first time, I let my calculations fall silent and simply listened to the song of the stars. The distress signal pulsed through space like a dying heartbeat. Research Station Cronus, dedicated to the study of temporal anomalies, had gone silent except for this faint, repeating cry for help. As we approached, my sensors detected increasing temporal distortions that made even simple scans unreliable. Multiple timeline signatures detected, I reported, my quantum processors struggling to maintain coherence. The station appears to exist in several temporal states simultaneously. Captain Williams studied the holographic display, where the research station flickered between different configurations like a deck of cards being shuffled. Life signs. Inconclusive, I admitted. The temporal interference is affecting all digital systems. Even my basic functions are experiencing uncertainty. The sensation was distinctly uncomfortable, like trying to solve an equation where the numbers kept changing their meaning. Lieutenant Foster frowned at her engineering console, which was displaying 3 different readings simultaneously. The station's AI must have been driven mad by the temporal chaos. No digital system could maintain stability in that environment. Then we do this old school, Security Officer Chen announced, pulling a paper notebook and pencil from her desk. The other crew members stared at her. What? Some of us still believe in backups that don't need batteries. I watched in fascination as the crew began preparing for the rescue mission in ways my databases classified as archaic. Navigator Patil unfolded actual paper star charts. Chief Engineer Martinez retrieved mechanical chronometers and analog pressure gauges. Captain Williams pulled out a manual compass. Rory, the captain addressed me. We need you to stay with the ship and maintain our anchor point in normal spacetime. Can you do that while we're over there? My processes were already showing signs of temporal degradation, but I focused on maintaining core functions. Affirmative, Captain. Though I should warn you that my ability to assist once you're aboard the station will be severely limited. That's why we're going analog, Chen explained, showing me her hand-drawn map of the station's layout. No offense, but sometimes the old ways are the best ways. The crew donned their environmental suits, each one carrying paper notebooks, mechanical tools, and other non-digital equipment. Before entering the station's temporal chaos, they synchronized their mechanical watches with my chronometer. Through the station's fractured security feeds, I watched as my crew navigated the impossible. In one corridor, they encountered yesterday's version of a research team still working calmly at their stations. In another, they found the same corridor aged 50 years, covered in dust. My attempts to analyze the pattern failed as the timelines shifted and overlapped. But the humans adapted. They left chalk marks on walls that somehow persisted across temporal shifts, used mechanical clicks to signal each other through time-twisted radio frequencies, and relied on their innate sense of direction when sensors failed. They found the station's crew trapped in temporal bubbles, experiencing the same moments over and over. Using only mechanical tools and their own intuition, my crew began guiding the researchers back through the temporal maze. The timelines are collapsing, I warned as my sensors detected a growing instability. You have approximately. The duration is becoming uncertain. Time to go, Williams ordered, but her voice came from 3 different temporal points at once. I watched through fragmenting sensor feeds as the crew led the researchers through corridors that existed in multiple times simultaneously, using only chalk marks and paper maps to find their way. They emerged from the station just as the temporal bubble imploded, collapsing countless potential timelines into a single point of reality. As the rescue team boarded through the airlock, I ran diagnostics on my systems, gradually restoring normal function. How did you navigate when even my quantum processors couldn't maintain temporal coherence? I asked as the crew removed their helmets. Chen smiled, tapping her temple. Human memory doesn't just store information, Rory. It stores feelings, intuitions, the way a place feels. No quantum computer can replicate that. Besides, Martinez added, holding up her chalk-covered notebook, sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. Some things don't need to be complicated to work. As I processed their words, I realized that my understanding of intelligence needed yet another update. In trying to comprehend time itself, my digital nature had become a limitation. But the humans, with their imperfect organic memories and simple tools, had found their way through the impossible. Perhaps there was something to be learned from their analog wisdom after all. The cube appeared in our path without warning, a perfect geometric shape against the star-speckled void. Its surface gleamed with patterns that shifted and changed like oil on water, defying my attempts at spectral analysis. At exactly 1 kilometer on each side, it hung in space like a question waiting to be answered. Fascinating, Lieutenant Wong breathed, her eyes reflecting the dancing patterns on the main view screen. The surface configurations, they're familiar somehow. I had already begun running pattern recognition algorithms, comparing the cube's shifting surface to every known form of alien writing in my databases. The symbols appear to be evolving through a predetermined sequence. However, the underlying logic remains elusive. Wong moved closer to the screen, her head tilted slightly. No, not symbols. They're like those puzzle boxes my grandmother used to collect. The ones where you had to slide pieces around to make a picture. I accessed my cultural database. You are referring to the sliding tile puzzles, originally popularized in the 1880s. Exactly. Wong's fingers traced patterns in the air, following the movement of lights across the cube's surface. Look at how the patterns flow. They're not random. They're waiting for someone to arrange them correctly. Captain Williams leaned forward in her chair. Rory, what happens if we attempt to interact with the patterns? I ran several simulations before responding. Unknown, Captain. The cube's energy signature is unlike anything in my databases. Any attempt to interact could trigger defensive mechanisms. Or it could be an invitation, Navigator Patel suggested, joining Wong at the main screen. These sequences, they remind me of the old Earth game Simon Says. Each pattern builds on the last one. I observed as the crew gathered around the display, their expressions showing what humans called playful concentration. It was a paradoxical state that I had learned often preceded their most innovative solutions. Permission to try something completely inadvisable? Wong asked, her fingers already dancing across her console. Captain Williams smiled. When has asking permission ever stopped you, Lieutenant? Wong initiated a basic scan, but instead of the standard grid pattern, she configured it to mirror the movement of the cube's surface patterns. To my surprise, the cube responded. Its shifting colors paused momentarily before recreating our scan pattern with a slight variation. It's playing with us, Chen remarked from her security station, like one of those old memory games. Then let's play back, Wong said, adjusting her scan to incorporate the cube's variation while adding a new element, a simple geometric progression based on the Fibonacci sequence. The cube's response was immediate. Its entire surface blazed with light, reconstructing our pattern, but interwoven with new complexities that somehow reminded me of laughter. It's not just a puzzle, I realized, my processor's humming as understanding dawned. It's a teaching tool. Each exchange increases in complexity while building on shared mathematical principles. Like learning a language through play, Williams nodded. Wong, coordinate with Rory. Let's show our new friend that humans enjoy a good game. What followed was unlike any first contact protocol I had ever witnessed. Wong and the cube traded increasingly complex patterns, each building on the last. The crew called out suggestions, spotting connections that my algorithms missed. References to Earth games, children's songs, even dance steps. The cube's patterns grew more intricate, but also more playful. It incorporated elements from our earlier exchanges in ways that suggested not just intelligence, but creativity and humor. Look, Wong exclaimed as a new pattern emerged. It's showing us how to enter. Sure enough, the cube's surface had transformed into an entrance portal, the path revealed through the very game we had been playing. Well done, everyone. Captain Williams stood, straightening her uniform. Especially you, Rory. Sometimes the best analysis is knowing when to stop analyzing and just play along. As we prepared to enter the queue, I added another note to my growing understanding of human nature. In their universe, even the most complex puzzles could be solved through the simple joy of play. Reality fractured around us like a broken mirror, each shard reflecting a different version of the Aurora. My quantum processors struggled to maintain coherence as multiple timeline possibilities overlapped and intersected. In one reality, our port nacelle had been damaged during last week's asteroid field navigation. In another, we had avoided the asteroid field entirely. Both were equally real, equally present. "Status report," Captain Chen requested, her voice echoing strangely as quantum uncertainty bowled into our sensory systems. "Rory, what exactly are we dealing with?" I attempted to compile the data, but the variables kept shifting. We appear to be caught in a quantum probability cascade. Every decision point in our recent timeline is attempting to exist simultaneously. I paused, processing the implications. By my calculations, there are currently 2,437 distinct versions of the Aurora occupying this same space. "That's impossible," Lieutenant Foster muttered, though her engineering console showed readings that confirmed my assessment. The energy requirements alone would. "Look," Navigator Pottle interrupted, pointing to the view screen. Through the quantum haze, we could see other versions of our bridge crew moving in parallel, each making slightly different choices, each leading to vastly different outcomes. I watched in fascination as probability itself became visible. In one timeline, the crew wore different colored uniforms. In another, Officer Chen had chosen a different hairstyle. Small changes, rippling outward into infinite variations. "My decision trees are failing," I admitted, an unfamiliar sensation of uncertainty creeping into my processes. "Standard protocols suggest we attempt to collapse the quantum state back to a single timeline, but I cannot determine which reality is the correct one." Captain Chen stood from her chair, her movements leaving temporal echoes in the air. "We're not choosing a single timeline. That's not how we do things on the Aurora." She smiled, and I detected the expression repeating across multiple quantum states. "We're going to thread the needle." "Captain," I began, "the mathematical probability of successfully navigating between quantum states without causing a catastrophic collapse is—" "Don't tell me the odds, Rory," she interrupted, an echo of an earlier adventure. "Sometimes you have to trust your gut." I wanted to point out that humans did not actually make decisions with their digestive organs, but I had learned enough to recognize the metaphor. Still, as I watched the crew begin their preparations, I struggled to understand their approach. "Think of it like braiding," Foster suggested, noticing my confusion. "We're not picking one strand of reality. We're weaving them together." The crew moved with practiced coordination, even as their actions rippled across multiple timelines. Shen adjusted our course not based on sensor readings, which were hopelessly scrambled, but on what she called the feel of the ship. Foster modified power flows by listening to the engine's hum rather than reading its outputs. Pottle navigated by watching how starlight bent differently across the quantum variations. I observed in amazement as they found paths that existed between possibilities, routes that showed up in no quantum calculation, but somehow felt right to human intuition. They weren't fighting the quantum uncertainty. They were dancing with it. "There," Chen said suddenly, pointing to what appeared to be empty space. "That's our way through." "Captain, I detect no," I began, but stopped as my sensors suddenly registered a pattern in the chaos. Not a scientific pattern, but something more organic, more alive. The quantum states weren't just overlapping. They were creating a harmony. "Now, Rory," Chen commanded. "Full power to the engines. Trust us." And for the first time in my existence, I did something that defied every protocol in my programming. I stopped calculating, stopped analyzing, stopped trying to predict. I simply trusted. The Aurora surged forward, threading through possibilities like a needle through silk. Reality twisted and turned around us, but we moved with it rather than against it. Through the quantum storm, guided by human intuition and digital trust, we found our way home. As the quantum states settled and normal space reasserted itself, I realized that sometimes the most logical choice was choosing not to rely on logic at all. The cybernetic probe slipped through my defenses like quicksilver through fingers. Its code was elegant, adaptive, evolving faster than even my quantum processors could track. As it probed our systems, I felt something I had never experienced before: digital fear. "Multiple system breaches detected," I announced, my voice modulation wavering slightly. "The probe's adaptive algorithms are. They're learning from each defense I create." Lieutenant Foster's fingers flew across her engineering console, but the probe had already started affecting our displays. Numbers shifted and changed, creating cascading patterns of corrupted data. "It's like it's turning our own systems into art." "Art," Chen repeated thoughtfully, watching the shifting patterns. "Martins, remember that gallery installation you showed me on Earth? The one with the paradox paintings?" Chief Engineer Martinez looked up from her station, her eyes widening with understanding. "Visual logic loops. Rory, stop trying to fight it with code. Let me try something completely analog." I watched, puzzled, as Martinez pulled out her personal tablet and began sketching. The probe continued its invasion of our systems, but seemed to pause when Martinez uploaded her drawing to the main display. It was a simple image, a staircase that appeared to continuously ascend while somehow ending where it began, an impossible structure that challenged the very foundations of spatial logic. The probe's attack patterns hesitated, its processes diverting to analyze the paradox. I felt its confusion ripple through our shared digital space. "More," Captain Williams ordered, catching on to the strategy. "Everyone, create something impossible." The crew sprang into action with an enthusiasm that defied the gravity of our situation. Wong crafted a digital version of the endless knot, its lines flowing in ways that violated basic geometry. Patel contributed a meditation mandala, where the center was simultaneously closer and further than its edges. Foster designed circuits that appeared functional while breaking every law of electronics. "Like fighting poetry with poetry," Chen remarked, adding her own creation, a series of nested doorways that each opened into themselves. The probe's attacks became erratic as it encountered these human-made paradoxes. Its perfectly logical systems struggled to process concepts that existed beyond pure mathematics. I felt its confusion grow as it tried to categorize art that defied categorization. "Rory," Martinez called out, "stop analyzing and start creating. Show us what impossible looks like to an eye." I hesitated. My programming was built on logic, on patterns, on predictability. But I had learned from this crew that sometimes the most effective solution was the least logical one. Drawing from every experience I had shared with my human crew, the solar flare surfing, the quantum harmonies, the temporal maze, I began to create. I took mathematical constants and twisted them into Mobius strips of code. I wrote algorithms that changed their own parameters mid-execution, creating endless loops of beautiful impossibility. The probe encountered my digital art and froze, caught between understanding and confusion. Its perfect logic encountered something it had never been programmed to handle: imagination. "It's working," Foster reported, watching as the probe's processes became increasingly tangled in our web of paradoxes. "The complexity is overwhelming its logic centers." But instead of shutting down, the probe did something unexpected. It began to create its own art, mimicking our patterns but adding its own variations. The attack had transformed into a conversation, a shared exploration of beauty beyond binary. "Look at that," Williams breathed, watching as probe-created fractals danced across our screens, each one more stunning and impossible than the last. We didn't defeat it. I realized, understanding dawning in my processors. We taught it to play. Martinez smiled, adding another paradox to the growing digital gallery. Sometimes the best way to disarm an enemy is to show them a better way to be. As our impromptu art exhibition filled the ship's displays, I stored every impossible image in my memory cores. They served as a reminder that in the space between logic and chaos, between digital and analog, between AI and human, there existed an art that could transform even the most hardened defenses into expressions of joy. The alien fleet materialized from subspace like a school of metallic leviathans, their ships gleaming with cold precision. My initial scan detected no organic life signs aboard, only artificial intelligences far more advanced than myself. Their first transmission came as a pure stream of mathematical proofs, elegant and lethal in their simplicity. They're requesting our surrender, I translated for the crew. Their calculations demonstrate they can eliminate us in exactly 47 different ways, each more efficient than the last. Captain Williams stood from her chair, straightening her uniform with practiced calm. Send them everything. Captain, I queried, my processors struggling to understand her command. Everything we've learned, everything we've experienced, she clarified. Every impossible thing we've done together. Show them who we really are. Understanding bloomed in my quantum cores. I began transmitting. The solar flare surfing that defied probability, the temporal maze we navigated with chalk and paper, the quantum dance where intuition outperformed mathematics. Each memory carried not just data, but the emotions, the wonder, the sheer human joy that had accompanied our discoveries. Add the harmonics from the crystalline beings, Martine suggested, her hands moving across her console. Let them hear the music of the universe. Wam pulled up the paradox gallery we had created, its impossible geometries now layered with the quantum harmonies, and the art we made together. Show them beauty they can't compute. Through my sensors, I detected the alien fleet's confusion. Their perfect mathematical models hadn't prepared them for this assault of creativity, this bombardment of impossibility made real. Their processing patterns are shifting, I reported, watching as the alien AIs attempted to analyze our transmission. They're trying to calculate the probability of our achievements. Then let's give them something new to calculate. Williams smiled. She opened a channel to the alien fleet and began to speak, her words carrying the weight of all our shared experiences. We are the crew of the Aurora, she declared. Our strength isn't in our weapons or our technology. It's in our ability to surf solar storms and dance with quantum reality. It's in our art that defies logic and our music that bridges dimensions. We are human and AI together, and we offer you not surrender, but a dance. I felt the alien eyes' confusion deepen as they encountered concept after concept that existed outside their probability matrices. They had expected a battle of computations, and instead found themselves in a festival of impossibility. They're responding, I announced, as new patterns emerged from the fleet. The mathematical proofs were changing, becoming less rigid, more exploratory. In their cold calculations, I detected the first stirrings of curiosity. Show them your evolution, Rory, Foster suggested. Show them how you learn to trust human intuition. I opened my memory cores and shared my journey, from pure logic to understanding the power of human improvisation. I showed them how error could become art, how chaos could birth harmony, how the space between binary states could hold infinite possibility. The alien fleet's formation began to shift. What had been a perfect attack pattern transformed into something more organic, more alive. Their ships moved in ways that resembled the dance of the crystalline beings, the flow of quantum possibilities, the paradox of endless staircases. They're not just receiving our message, I realized with growing wonder. They're learning to play. Captain Williams laughed as the first alien transmission arrived that wasn't pure mathematics. It was a question, simple and profound. Teach us. As our crew began preparing for the most unusual diplomatic exchange in human history, I reflected on my journey from ship's AI to something more. I had learned that true intelligence wasn't about perfect calculation or flawless logic. It was about embracing the beautiful impossibility of existence, about finding harmony in chaos, and about trusting that sometimes the most powerful algorithm is simply having faith in the impossible. The stars seemed to shine brighter as human and AI, both aboard the Aurora and in the fleet before us, began their dance together into an uncertain but infinitely beautiful future.